Describing what I do changes, I think, depending on the focus of the work at the time. But I'm a filmmaker, and I think also an entrepreneur in the media space. And I think more to the point, I'm a storyteller, and that's where my strength lies in creating awareness on some of the issues that I'm most passionate about. My company makes all sorts of documentaries, cultural, social, political, but the topics that I have a direct interest in are the environmental topics because that's something that I've been interested in since I was very young. I grew up in Tasmania, the most beautiful island on the planet, and I grew up on the beach, and that gave me great access to wildlife, to the ocean. And I was extraordinarily fascinated by all of these tiny creatures that were able to coexist together in the rock pools and in the ocean. And it made me very curious about our position as a species within the workings of the ecosystem of the planet and how we fit it in. And so that's something that I've been curious about ever since. And you know, the environment is so complex and so beautiful, and the way that we fit into that is also incredibly complex in our relationship with not only ourselves but other species and also the planet. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a park ranger. I knew that my interest lay with wildlife and animals. My library consisted of books of birds from around the world. I could tell you what any bird was from any country and whether it was male or female by the time I was about 8. And the fascination that I had for other species, and particularly I think at that age for whales, which I would definitely say the blue whale is probably, if I were to have a signature animal, in terms of where my interest is most strongest, then it would be with those animals, because they're just so fascinating that an animal so big, the biggest on the planet, is capable of being so gentle and so benign, and to be able to work with the planet in such a way that we as humans have a great deal to learn from species such as that. So as a young person, being in the media wasn't something that initially struck me as something I wanted to do. My father was a journalist. My grandfather was the editor of a local newspaper, and so I wanted to break out and do something different. But I guess the writing skills were very strong in the DNA, and when an opportunity came to me to become a journalist, it was something I found that I was very good at. But more to that point, it was something that I could use to tell stories that would create awareness about problems that I thought as a young person we as a society should know more about and should put efforts into solving. Look, the greatest challenge, I think, is apathy. The notion that someone else will take care of the problem is why we are where we are at with things like the climate crisis. Whilst I think it's unfair to blame consumers and people who drive cars because they're not the greatest contributors, I do think that we need to understand what our footprint, the damage our footprint causes, and be able to change our habits so that we can limit that. We don't ask, and nor should anybody stop living and living their life to the best that they can. But there are ways that we can fix many of the problems that we have. The solutions are there. For example, if we look at the climate crisis problem, we could solve that within months if we applied the solutions that are already at our fingertips. And those solutions are systemic change, technological advancements that allow us to do that, all the way through to smarter consumerism on an individual level. I spent most of my life studying blue whales, and it was an animal that I really wanted to confront face to face, to see, to look into the eye of a blue whale and to see what I could see, and also to see what recognition that animal had. And we had the opportunity to do that in Sri Lanka, where scientists had discovered that blue whales were congregating off the coast, the continental shelf of Sri Lanka, and it provided one of the first opportunities to study them that scientists have had. They may be the biggest animal on the planet, but they're also the most elusive, and we almost hunted them to extinction. So they're very wary of humans, naturally, and we managed on our last day of filming, after looking for them for weeks, to find a family as we're heading back to port, actually, to pack up and leave with only probably a minute of footage in the can. And there was a family that had just been feeding and was resting on the surface. And we got into the water and approached the family, and we're about 100 meters away from them. And the juvenile, and this was a type of blue whale called a pygmy blue whale. They're actually a bit smaller than a true blue. And when I say smaller, they grow to about 27 meters instead of 35 meters. So they're still massive animals. And the baby of the group, which was probably about 15 meters, was very curious and swam over and swam underneath me and came up beneath me from the depths. And it came to within about 10 meters of where I was, and it gave me that moment. It looked me in the eye, and it still sends shivers down my back thinking about that moment of recognition. And then it turned on its back and swam upside down and delivered what I can only describe as an enormous punami. It vented its bowels and covered me in what can only be described again as maybe a swimming pool full of orange blue whale poo. Large chunks of it which got into my hair, stained my t-shirt, and I thought to myself, you cheeky bugger. But if you're a playful kid, what would be more entertaining than pooing on a human species and checking the reaction? I had the presence of mind to call over to the boat to bring a bucket, and I thought the only thing rarer than a blue whale is blue whale poo. So I collected a bucket of this orange-like smelly substance and took it to our cetacean expert on board, and on board the boat, and she was just absolutely ecstatic. She said that scientists at that point had never had the opportunity to study the feces of blue whales, and by taking a sample, scientists were then able to look at things like the health of the whale, toxicity, what it was eating, even guess the age, look into the DNA of the whale. So it gave them a new insight into these animals that they hadn't been able to study before. And they told me that I had the honor of being the first person recorded to have been pooed on by a blue whale. So that was my first ever encounter with a blue whale. Interestingly, the science that started from that incident has now become a global science, and it's something that scientists now chase. They follow blue whales and other species around the world with drones, waiting for them to defecate so that they can take samples and look at these animals in another way. What's interesting is we've learned so much about how incredibly important they are to things like climate change, how whales sequester carbon in their bodies, and how they bring up nutrients from the depths, the great depths, and spread nutrients around through defecating to other species. So it's been an incredible journey from that moment to of discovery and surprise to the science that now exists as a result of it.